Thank you. Hi, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name is Maria Spitalnik, and I am here to help show you some ways to make some quilts a little easier, a little quicker, and a little more forgiving for the new quilter. But we do have some more advanced stuff for some of you who've been around for a little bit and are getting a little bit more confidence in what you're doing. So in past live streams, and I know I'm behind on editing them to get just the organizational nugget at the beginning onto the channel. I apologize for that. It has been crazy around here. I'm going to show you why a little bit later. But we've talked about fabric. We've talked about washing it, storing yardage and fat quarters, how to store strips and blocks and bricks and you know that kind of stuff, all the little pieces. Well, once you have a lot of little pieces, logically it seems to me the next thing we should talk about is thread. So I'm going to talk a little bit about spools, but not a whole lot, because these days most of them have these little rings at the top that you can pull up, wrap your thread around, and snap down, and it's going to keep your thread from unraveling. So, this is a much better solution than the little slit in the top that we have with this kind of spool. But even some spools don't even have that. So what do you do? One of my oldest solutions is actually an old headband, and you can tell how old this one is because of the metal piece right here. This is back before they just glued the ends together like they do now. And I've had people ask me, well, does that work on any size spool? Well, yep, you just double it up a little more for these little teeny tiny ones that come in sewing kits, and it will work on a cone. Now, a lot of people have those mesh sleeves that they put over their cones and their spools and things like that. For some reason, whenever I use those, they stretch out enough that they just don't stay the way that they're supposed to. I guess I haven't found the right brand yet. So I don't tend to use those. What I tend to do is the spools I use all the time are in a drawer right here off to my side. And I go through them fairly quickly. Now, one thing I don't care for are the wall-mounted spool holders with the piece of wood at an angle. I'm trying to do this here so you can see it right. At an angle. And then the spool sits like that. And there's a whole bunch of them. Because I don't go through spools fast enough. The problem is that if they're exposed, then you wind up getting dust on the thread. Then dust gets in your machine. You have to clean your machine more often. And to me, it's not worth making a cover for it, because if I have them out, it's because I want to see them. Now, if you are, let's say, a long armor who uses your thread all the time, then that's a very convenient way to store it. So you don't have that problem. But for your casual once in a while, I do this as my hobby kind of sewer, I don't tend to recommend those kinds of racks. But my long armors love them because they can see everything, and they use a ton of thread whenever they load their machine, and they go through it fast enough on their regular colors that it's not a problem. Okay, so if you sew a lot, sure, go ahead and go for it. But for a lot of us, it's just more work than it's worth. Okay, you can just lay them in drawers, and cones, you just alternate the directions so the fat ends are opposite, and they'll nest together better. I have done that with thread before, where I've just laid it in a drawer. I've packed it in Ziploc bags and one flat layer. And if you squeeze the air out, you can lift the bag out, and it tends to actually stay pretty flat. You could always add a piece of cardboard in there to add that rigidity too. And I was looking back the other day. I'm going to show you. I used to keep my thread in this. Isn't this adorable? There's no way I could put even my bobbins in here anymore. But I started small, and then I grew. So let me show you what I do most of the time now. When my spools get low like this, I have two choices. I can either spin it onto a bobbin, or I can put it onto a card, and I'm going to show you what the card is. But let's talk bobbins first. Now, you can buy bobbins pre-wound. They come in these little packages. There's no reason why you can't reuse these to store your bobbins in afterwards. You just pop it off the side, put your bobbin in, and then close it back down. So I have a lot of people who do this. So when they look at theirs, there may be 5 different colors in here, and that's perfectly fine. It's a nice, compact, easy way to store it. And if you like to do this, you could put a hook on your wall and put all of your bobbins on the wall. So I do keep some things in these, but not very often. What I tend to use are 2 main things. I have one of these. Okay, well, actually, it normally looks like this. Okay, it has this little base, and then all these different things. And I usually load up one of these if I'm traveling with the threads that I'm using, so that I have everything I need in the one place, or 2. If I'm going on retreat, maybe 3 or 4. Okay, depending on how long I'll be gone. Now, I like these for the small ones, the ones that aren't full, because these ears go most of the way around. Here's a full bobbin. I'm not as much of a fan of it for this, simply because these ears are barely holding on. And while it does have some nice tension to it, I'm always afraid they're going to pop out. So I use this for my little guys, and I tend to use a ring for my full bobbins. Now, I also have some partials in here. You can see this little brown here. There isn't a whole lot to it. It all depends on what I'm in the mood for. Now, what I like about these is they come in a bunch of different colors. So, like, I have this purple one, and a blue one, and a red one. If you use a lot of different kinds of thread, one nice thing about these is that you can write on the side what it is. So if it's important to you, you can put that it's a 100% cotton, and then its weight, 50 or 60 or 80 or whatever your weight is. You could say silk and its weight. You could just say silk or cotton or poly or blend or whatever, and keep them that way. Personally, I use what I have, whatever I have, in whichever way I can possibly use it. So for me, it's a lot less important. If I'm doing a piece where the thread is truly important, I've purchased thread specifically for that, and when that project is over, it's now available for general use. Okay, so for me, I tend to keep them by colors, by project, or just whatever I'm in the mood for that day. At least 2 of my rings are just neutrals. So white, black, gray, tan, just to make sure that I can always grab that and go if I'm going somewhere to do something. So I do love these rings. However, I also have a box, and in the box I have skewers like this. And I have run the skewers through the bobbins like so. And these tend to be all my little tag end pieces. Now there's a couple here that are a little bit more neutral. But I finished a project. There's a little bit left. It's too much, or I just haven't had time to card it yet. So it just goes onto one of these skewers. It sits in the box, and I can just pull out whatever skewer I want when I'm looking for that color. I tend to keep them by color family, but I wanted you to see a variety of value on here. Now, sometimes when I travel, I will use a travel kit that I've talked about on this live stream before. And this is my travel kit. So if I have full bobbins I want to take instead of just my cards, I will take the bobbin and either wrap it with a simple twist tie like you get with your trash. I don't have it handy. I don't know where oh, here they are. Right in front of me. Twist ties. Simple. Okay? Wrap it around, half a twist, put it back down, works fine. You can also use pipe cleaners. Okay? Now, with the twist tie, you can see about half of the color. With the pipe cleaner, not so much. You can see it from the top, though. So this will hold onto that thread, keep it all nice and tight, so when it's loose in the bag, it's not going to be a problem. Okay? Now, what I tend to do, though, is what I call card my threads. When I get down, like I said, to small amounts like this, I take them and I put them on a piece of cardboard. Now, this could be from a cream cheese box. Could be from anything. This is actually a professional one. This one came in a sewing kit. But I do the same thing. So here's mine. Here's theirs. Same idea. Now this one I just cut with a pair of scissors. Later on I got a little bit more sophisticated because I found my pinking blade for my rotary cutter. And so rather than cutting all these little triangles out with scissors, I just rolled the rotary cutter up and down both sides, and then I wrapped it. You will need a slit at each end to end your thread on, because you don't want to have to drag it all the way across, especially if you have multiple colors. If they're all one like this, then sure you can, but I still like having one at each end, and then I just work it in from the edges. The nice thing about doing that is when this thread is gone, I can snip it here and make my card smaller. So when I travel and I'm doing handwork, this works out really well because I can pull whatever cards I have that have the colors I want and throw 10 of these into my travel bag and take up very, very little space compared to 10 bobbins or 10 spools. So that's why I put the things on the card. So you can tell that this was taken off a spool because it's all the same color. Sometimes, though, I've had a lot less, and so I'll put multiples on a card. It doesn't matter. If you're doing a project, there's no reason you couldn't put some of each color on the card and then travel with it, and then just pull off what you need. You tend to be able to put a good 2, 3, even 4 yards, depending on how deeply you make the cuts, of thread in each of these slots. So it'll last you a lot longer than you expect. So this one is actually the reason I started doing it, because I realized just how much thread was here for doing repairs, and it fit in no space at all. So I really recommend that you do this with your tag ends. And so my containers are getting smaller as my thread volume is as well. So I can go from my cone to a bobbin to a card and not have a lot of wasted space. I really hate it when I have this giant cone and there's maybe 2 bobbins worth of thread on it. I can get rid of that whole cone out of my drawer and make a lot more space by going ahead and putting it onto the bobbins. So that's the tip for today in terms of how to handle thread. So recently, I told you last time that I was going to be going on a trip to Phoenix. Well, I took the trip. And Phoenix was lovely. It really was. Apparently they've been having a lot of rain lately, so surprisingly. It was very, very green and lush, and it was beautiful. There was flowers. The cacti even had flowers, some of them, which was really kind of cool. And I saw some varieties of cactus I've never seen before. But I did take some pictures, and I thought, what the heck, you might enjoy seeing them. So on this one, it makes me think of where do I get inspiration from? So down here at the bottom, there was a very flat layer of clouds, and above there's a very flat layer of clouds. But right here in the middle, if you look, that's either a submarine or it could be a shark with its mouth open, ready to bite. At least that's the way I saw it. Hold on one second. I've lost my page here. Okay. So then my next one, as I was flying into Phoenix, I saw these mountains, and it had been super flat. And within like the last half hour, it kind of looked like someone had taken a ball of aluminum foil and crumpled it all up and then mostly flattened it back out. And there's just ridge after ridge after ridge, and a lot of them had one side that was green and one side that was brown. So you could really tell the direction that the rain had come in on, and so it had run out when it hit the top, and then it moved on. So it was really fascinating to watch that. Then I saw these, and I thought that they were rivers at first, but they're not. They're like dry washes. So when they've had monsoon season, they've become rivers and streams, but most of the time they're not. They're just these sandy finger-like things. And it made me think kind of like a spider web or something else. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with this inspirationally, but it is kind of fun to look at and think about it maybe as a quilting pattern, you know, tucked into a triangular piece or something. Just a little bit different. So here's a little bit bigger view where you go from being in the mountains and then all of a sudden it's flat where the city is, just past the mountains. So then we've got city. But what's really interesting is that here you can see all the buildings, and then about halfway back you can see this one mountaintop sticking up. And they're just kind of hiding in the city in plain sight where nobody's been able to build, but they can have that mountain right there. So I did think that that was kind of fun. And so as I was flying in, it was very late. And I was really surprised that at the airport at 7 o'clock, I know I said it was really late, but it was 10 o'clock for me. So at 7 o'clock, I'm landing, and all the food places are closed. There's not a single store open in the airport, nothing. It's all closed. So I went out and I met the gal who was driving me, and her name is Kat, which I found interesting because we used to have a office assistant named Kat who moved to Phoenix, but it's a different girl. So I was kind of hoping as I was going to the exit it was the Kat that we knew, but it wasn't. But it was really fun to have that anticipation. So Kat drove me to the hotel, being kind and sweet enough that she actually went through a Burger King for me so I could get something to drink. And so we got to the hotel and I got checked in and I told Scott where I was and all of that. But I had my dinner on the plane at approximately 4 o'clock. And it was now 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock my time. So I was kind of hungry. So I went downstairs to the restaurant, and this was my midnight snack. So I tried to be healthy. You can see there's chicken, and the crumbled cheese is goat cheese. And I was kind of surprised at that they treated it like feta. So I'm eating my salad, and I'm feeling a little bit on the virtuous side, I'll admit, when they came out with this. Apparently, every one of their meals comes with this loaf of bread, and it was about that big. And what's underneath it is whipped butter with tomatillos in it. And so I said, okay, I am not going to eat this now. I'm going to eat my salad because it's midnight my time. My tummy doesn't need a whole lot because I'm going to be going right to bed. So I had them pack that to go, and they even brought me extra butter and everything. And that was what I had for breakfast. Because for me, breakfast was 3 o'clock their time, because we normally eat 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning here on the East. So I was so thrilled that I took this back. Now, not so good of me was the fact that when I checked in, they said that I got one free dessert for my stay. So I had them also box up churros that they had that come with chocolate sauce and caramel sauce to go. And I had that as part of my breakfast too. But it was yummy. The only real quilt-related thing that I saw at the hotel were the medallions on the floor. Now, there was a different one upstairs that for some reason I just could not get a good picture of. But in this particular case, this is the main one when you walk in. The other ones down the hall, if you look all the way in the back, it's the same basic design, it's just a little smaller. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't switch it over, I'm sorry. So that's the quilting pattern. And then this is, so in the back you can see the other ones. Here's some details so you can see. I did find it really interesting that right next to the stars and the diamonds, particularly the diamonds, you can see that they sat the cream-colored tiles parallel with the diamonds, and then filled in the opposite direction with the center part, rather than just making it go straight across. And I think it made the diamonds stand out a little bit more. They did the same thing with the leaves and everything else, where that first row of the cream color outlined the shape, kind of like we would do with echo quilting. So this was my view out my front, out my window. You can see that there's some nice color and things going on here. The Brinks truck unfortunately didn't bring me anything. But this is the pool. Apparently it's a big thing in Phoenix that the hotels often have lazy rivers. And of course all the water parks do. So the pool has its own lazy river. So I thought that was kind of cool. Now inside they had a lot of these pieces of wood that looked kind of like driftwood, but obviously it was too big for that. But they were beautifully colored. And then they accented it with earth tone, different potteries and things like that. But this one in particular didn't even have a flat top on it. So I thought that the color changes and stuff was kind of interesting, and I thought this might be an interesting technique to use sometime in the future in a quilt, where you have all the different gradients of color flowing across like that. I did find it interesting in the Phoenix airport, but none of the others. Every single seat has a power jack and it has a cup holder. They say that they are the friendliest airport, and they were very, very nice there in Phoenix. So here we are heading on out. Again, completely flat. And then this is the flight where the child screamed the entire time. This was a little over an hour and a half. And then I switched in Denver. And I have to say, I felt kind of weird about this, because apparently when you add altitude to heat, altitude makes for thinner air to start with, and then you add heat. So even though it has one of the longest runways, and we were going to be taking it, I think he called it 16 right. we were still too heavy. So they burned off 800 gallons of fuel. Took about an hour. And I was sitting there wondering, well, why don't they just have like little trucks that can pull up, siphon the fuel out, and then put it in another plane and save all that fuel and all that money? You know, and the captain was like, well, let's just hope it doesn't go up another degree, because then we'll have to do more. And so we managed to take off, but we were on the ground, up a little bit, and then back on the ground, and up and down, and up and down. We must have had our wheels touch down like 8 more times. And all I could picture was Thanksgiving dinner. And everybody's so stuffed, and they're like struggling to get out of their chairs. That's what my poor plane was doing. So we took off, and ultimately we stayed in the air instead of coming back down, which was very good. So we did all of that. There were a couple of other times that felt like we were heading down again, but we got up and we did it the way we were supposed to go. And we made up the lost time, which was very nice. So I still got in at a reasonable time last night. But on the second flight, on the first flight, there was no food, but they gave us these stroopwafel, or pretzels. So of course, I'm going for a stroopwafel. And so it's basically a super thin waffle with caramel inside. And it suggests that I know this is sideways, I'm sorry. I thought I had everything straightened out, but I missed this one. It suggests that you put it on top of your coffee cup. Oh, I didn't switch you back to PowerPoint. I'm sorry. There we go. They suggest that you put it on top of your cup to warm it up, but I had soda, so that didn't help. Overall, it was kind of interesting. It tasted good. I think that the concept was niftier than the actual way it came out. But overall, it made for a very nice snack. And then I was home. This is Dulles Airport. This is on the little mini train. So if you haven't been to Dulles Airport, there's 2 major terminals. There's the first one where you arrive and depart. And then there's a terminal in the back. And they don't have a train or anything like that. What they have are these little short mini buses that drive around from terminal to terminal to get you where you're going. So that was the shot from the little bus. And so I told Scott that I was finally on my way once I was on that little bus and heading for the terminal. And so he came and he got me and he brought me home. And I'm still jet lagged because I didn't have enough time to acclimate out in Phoenix. So unfortunately, I didn't get to do a whole lot out there. I wish I had. I'd love to go back again and be there for a longer period of time. Since I flew out Sunday night late, and then I was there all day Monday, and then I left the hotel at 6:45 their time in the morning, which was, of course, 15 minutes before the restaurants opened. So, like I said, this whole thing was kind of weird. So I was only there really for the one day, and we had a major storm coming through and everything, so I didn't get out and get a chance to look at things very much, and I do regret that. I will say that in the Phoenix airport, they were open for breakfast, and so I went to one of the pubs, and I had a wonderful breakfast burrito. So I did have some real food to eat before I started my flight. I wasn't counting just on stroopwafels for the first part of my day. But anyway, so that was my Phoenix trip. I was there to speak for the Crisis Intervention Team's International Conference. Next year it's in Pittsburgh, so I hope that they ask me to come back, because that's when I can drive to and stay a little bit longer. And I also know Pittsburgh a little bit better, so I know some things that I want to see there. And I just found out today that in November I'm going to be teaching at NAPSA, which is the National Adult Protective Services Association. and that's going to be in San Diego, California in November. So I'm going to be going out for that one. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I have to admit I was a little nervous about Phoenix in August. I did once upon a time attend a conference in Las Vegas in August, and I remember it being 108 degrees at 3 o'clock in the morning as we were looking at the Bellagio fountains. So I was a little nervous about Phoenix since it's been in the hundreds in the northernmost parts of our country. I was a little nervous about the desert in August, but all in all, it was the same weather as we were having here in Virginia in terms of temperatures and things. It's supposed to be warmer for the rest of the week. They're going to be in the hundreds, and since they don't have a lot of humidity, their 100 is 100. Here, our 100 feels like 120 often, but they also have the monsoon season, so they're having these major storms blowing through. Monday night it was 80-mile-an-hour winds, which I could not hear in my room, and I didn't even hear the storm until probably 3 in the morning. I heard a little bit of thunder and lightning. So the hotel was very well insulated, which was very nice. It wasn't until I went out into the hallway to go get some ice that I heard the rain on the roof. But other than that, it was nice and quiet, and it was a beautiful resort I was in, basically. So it would be nice to go back. Anyway, so that's what's going on. That's the one I just attended and the one that's coming up. I do have some local things that I'm going to be speaking at in September and October, but it's going to be fun. I'm hoping that I can get some quilt guilds in the San Diego area interested in having me come out and teach while I'm there, because that way I get to meet more people, which is always fun. I get to do more teaching, which I love to do. And it'll give me an excuse to stay in San Diego a little longer and check out more of it. So that's something that I'm looking for. So if you happen to know a quilt guild out in the a quilt guild or shop out in that area, and you would like to have me come and speak there if you're from out that way, I would love it. So please pass that information along. Now, it's 8:30. I am going to get into some of the stuff that we were working on last time. But just as a quick reminder, because I've been told I don't do this enough, if you enjoy this, please click subscribe, the bell if you want to know when my next live is, and it's always the first and third Wednesdays of the month, or whenever I post something new. And if you would like as well, I would really appreciate that. Okay? If this happens to be your first time as well, just so you know, my goal with this is that we have just like an open forum for the last part of these. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, or if you have a problem and you want to share pictures, we can do that. You can also go to StashBlasters.com, StashBlasterQuilts.com, and leave me a message there as well, or a question there. I always make sure if anything comes into the website that I answer it in the next live. So we've been working on updated versions of this quilt. Now this is Stash Blaster 1. If you go to StashBlasterQuilts.com, you can get this pattern. It's free. You're welcome to share it and use it for charity, fundraisers, anything you want to do with it. The idea is that you're making multiple quilts all at the same time, so you can make a lot in a very short period of time. But I've been doing some alternate settings and things like that to show, and last time I mentioned that I had put my new blue and white quilt. Now let me see. One of my cameras died earlier, so I'm going to kind of see if I can get this one to show you. Okay, it's sideways. Hold on. Let me turn it right side up. It doesn't want to go. There we go. Okay, so this blue and white one you can see. I'm going to be setting it with red sashing. But one of the strips, the one that was here, was one pair short. And that's why I put it on the wall, is because then that way I can make sure that they were all correct. Well, I think I may wind up calling this quilt the Forgiving Quilt, because not only was I short a pair, but when I sewed on the 6.5-inch strips that I had cut before, because I cut my strips the way I wanted them to be, and then I took my tag ends and I cut them down to 6.5 and a couple of other sizes. Look what I found. I found out that I had grabbed the wrong ruler when I cut my strip sets. I have one ruler that's 6 by 24 and one that's 6.5 by 24. And I meant to grab the 6.5, but grabbed the 6. Now the nice thing about this entire process with this quilt is it doesn't matter. I'm just going to trim this down so that it's also 6 inches. The only difference is it's going to change the math for how long my outside sashing needs to be. Everything else stays the same. So that's one of the things that I love about this quilt, is that you can use whatever you have and make it work, and it's not additional effort. I've even done some of these with a wide variety of different sizes. So I did one where I had some 12.5 strips, and I think I had a 3 3/4 and a like 5 or something like that. And I just put them together until I had a quilt the size I wanted it to be, and then I was done. So, I mean, it's definitely doable. If you are starting from scratch, I really recommend you just follow the directions on this. It'll give you all of your measurements, but you can go ahead and make it as long as you want, as wide as you want, whatever size strips you want. But when you're making them for quick production, it's best if they're all the same size, so that when you're cutting sashing strips, you cut them for all the quilts at the same time. You cut all of any outer borders that you're putting on at the same time, and they'll all be the same size. If you're just kind of hodgepodging it, that's fine, but it does mean you have to do the math in order to make sure you get that correct at the end. Or it means that you need to go ahead, assemble the whole middle part, then do your measuring and put on the sashing the way you normally would, so you'd be cutting that later. The way I prefer to do it is I cut all of it at once, my borders, and in this case, since my horizontal strips are going to be the same as my outer border, I'm going to cut those all at once too. So it does make a difference in how you handle that last little maneuver, because you don't want to run out of fabric right at the end. So that's why we also cut the sashing, the borders first, and then your sashing strips, because they're going to be smaller. And if you wind up having to piece some together, you can, but it will help you in the long run. So that's what I'm thinking. Okay, I did make another mistake last time, in that I didn't show you another alternate way to go ahead and do the layout for your cutting diagram. So now I'm going to have to move this camera back around and see if I can get us right side up again. So if I make you seasick, I'm sorry. Let me switch over. Okay, so we want to be right side up. And one of my light bulbs burned out just as we started, of course. Okay, so one of the things that I did was I calculated what my border length needed to be, and I put my long sides on here and my short sides, and then I estimated these are 2 inches to a block. So since my sashing is 2.5, the fact that I took up 3, it doesn't matter that I have that extra in there. The goal was to just be sure I had enough. And so when I did this, I found that I was going to need to add these strips on at the bottom and then piece in with some of these little blocks here. So another option would have been if I had instead taken this short border, added it here, so the piece would have been longer. Of course, I had to put it on the end. I would have had enough space to have gotten all of my sashing without having to seam the strips together. It does mean that I would be using more fabric and I would have more left over at the end. Okay? So it's faster, you don't have any seams to put in the middle to worry about, but you are going to have strips left. So what do you do with those? That's exactly the time when I will go ahead and cut any leftover pieces down into the strips and blocks and bricks and all of that we talked about at the last live. But I'll usually have enough that I can go ahead and cut it at the 2.5, trim off all the little edge pieces that I have, and seam those together on the diagonal and make binding. And although I won't use it most likely for this quilt, I could. In this case, since it's a red, white, and blue quilt, I think I'm probably going to bind it with something that's all 3 colors. But I could bind it with the rest of the red strips. But I'm more likely to just seam them all together, roll them on a toilet paper tube like I do the rest of them, and hang them on my wall. And then when I have another little project ready to go and ready to be bound, I can just pull that off the wall and either add it to other colors, or I can, if it's long enough, go ahead and bind an entire small project with what I have. I will sometimes measure how much I have and then write it on the toilet paper tube. And then that way, if I use any of it, I can just cross it out and write it again. And I'm not putting any pins in or any tape residue by using, marking it on tape on the fabric. None of that's going onto the actual fabric. So it helps prevent problems later. So I'm probably going to go ahead and just do it with the spool, and it'll be on as my binding. So I thought it might be fun if I took you on a fabric hunt with me today. I have my strips, you've seen them, and I thought I would pull down the sections of my design wall and we can talk about how to pick the color that's going to go with this blue and white quilt to make it a red, white, and blue quilt. So please indulge me, and you're going to wind up seeing my backside a lot, and I apologize for that. Okay, so I'm going to put this to a wider view. There we go. Okay, so this is my design wall behind me. For those of you who haven't seen this before, all of my yardage and fat quarters are behind here. And so, since this is a quilt, it doesn't stick up on its own very well. It just needs a couple of pins. So the first thing I'm going to do is take out those pins. Now, I'm not exactly sure where the red is behind here. I'm thinking it's right about here. So we're going to start with that panel, okay? So this quilt comes down, and I'm just going to drop it over here. Now, why do I hide my fabric behind the wall? Well, number one, I wanted a huge design wall. It's not uncommon for me to have 4 or 5 quilts up in production at any given time. So this way I can lay out blocks in lots of different ways from different projects all at the same time. So the first thing I need to do is pull my little retainer blocks out. And I let them go to the back. And I move this over. Now, one mistake I made in making these walls is that I made them floor to ceiling. I should have taken about 1 inch off because it would make it easier to move them around. But I also knew, as you can see, I have fabric right to the ceiling. So I wanted the sun protection as well, so that's why it's there. So it looks like I got some of my reds here, but not all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and peel these down. I'm just going to move them to the design wall over here, which you can't see, unfortunately. But I'm going to put them up, and then I'll move them over later so you can see them. I am not putting them up the same way. I'm just slamping them up vertically so that they're just held by the flannel. One of my favorite things about these design walls is that I made them two-sided, and they're still super light. So on one side, I have this cream color, but I have gray on the other. So if I have something that is a very light quilt or blocks, you can see them better on a medium gray than on the cream potentially. Okay, see, slapping them up, no big deal. So let me turn this around so you can see it. Oh, let me get these pins out of the way, because I almost always impale myself. Let me see if I can get this turned in the space I have. Nope, my fan's in the way. Hold on. If you haven't gathered, my sewing room isn't that big. Okay, so there's the gray. You see? So it does make for a nice ability to look at different fabrics with a different background and be able to choose a little easier. Okay, so here's my red section. Okay, now when we were doing this before, we knew that our short strips were going to be the same length as these strips, right? So, oops, let me get over here. There we go, so you can see better. So we have 13 of the colored strips and 14 of the white. So that's how much? That's 27 times 2 is 50. Hold on. 54 plus a half is what I'm going to need for my sashing that width-wise. Okay? So obviously, I can't use with the fabric. That's going to come in at about 40 to 42, and I need 54 and a half. So my choices are to either cut with the fabric strips, sew them on the diagonal together to make a longer strip, and then cut it to the length that I need. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you join the two pieces together, since they're 2.5 inches, you lose 2.5 inches from each strip. So just to be on the safe side, you're going to subtract that. So if your strip is normally 40, then you're going to assume that it is 37.5 when you're doing your calculations to add them all up. Okay? So that's what we're looking at. Now, maybe I should get back here to the math too to show you this. Hold on. Okay. Let's find the right camera. Here we go. And again, I'm sorry about the lighting. So here's our 54.5 that we mentioned before. Okay. Now, my strips, I don't remember where my original calculations were for my length. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. So 10 times 6 was 60, and then 7 times 2 is 14. Where did I get those numbers? I have 8, 6, no, sorry. I have 6 of these strips. Okay? 27 times 2 is 54, plus the half is 54.5. So that gave me 60 inches. Okay? And I need, because I have 7 strips. Do I have 7 strips? I have 7 because the other one's here. I need 6 for the middle. Okay? So that's going to be 60 inches here. Okay? When I add up all of this, then I get 74.5 is going to be my total length here for my long ones, because this 7 was the 6.5 here, okay, that I wanted on each end. Does that make sense? So I have 10 I'm sorry. I am completely screwing this up on you. Let's start again. This is what happens when I go back and do things, is that I lose track of where I was. Okay. I have I'm missing a strip. There it is. Okay, sorry. No, I do have 8. I pulled these off the wall and then just folded them up over here. And that's where I got myself confused. I'm sorry. Okay, so I have 8 rows. Okay, which means I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2-inch strips. So that's, okay, so I have 7 2-inch strips here. That's where I got this from. Okay, and this is my interior border, interior sashing. Plus, I have 10 times 6, 60. Nope. Okay. This is why live is not good for me some days. I am dreadfully sorry. So I have 8 strips. These are colored blue and white. Okay. That means I have 7 sashing in between. Okay. This means that I have 7 strips that will finish at 2 inches, is 14 inches. Then I have 2 borders that are short. So those are going to be 6.5 times 2 equals 13. Okay? So this is all my horizontals. Okay? Add these together, I get 27 inches. Okay? This is how high just the sashings are. Then I'm going to take the 8 colored strips times 6. Now, we know 6 is wrong because I cut them wrong. So we're going to do times 5.5. So 8 times 5.5. I'm tired, so I'm going to double check by doing it actually in the longhand here. So that's 44. Okay. Because 8 times 5 is 40. 40 times 4 is 44.0. So this is going to equal 44 inches in colors. So when we add this to our red sashing amount, 44 plus 27 equals 71 inches. This is the length of our 2 long borders. Okay, I hope that makes more sense. So that means we need 2 pieces that are going to be 6.5 by 71. We're going to need 2 pieces that are 6.5 by our width, which is 54.5. And then we're going to need 7 pieces that are going to be 2.5 by 54.5. Okay, this is all going to be my red material. Okay, I hope that makes more sense. This is why I double check my math 2 and 3 and 4 times sometimes, just to make sure. Doing it live like this and from 2 weeks ago was too long, and I apologize for that. So I've redone the math. Before I cut or tear or do whatever I'm going to do with this, I'm going to double check it again. Okay? And I'm also going to double check that all of my strips are at 6 inches. I'm pretty sure they are, but why take a chance on messing it up? So I will double check the width of all of my strips. I mean the height of all of my strips. I will also double check the width, that it came out to the 54.5 that it's supposed to. So I hope that that all makes sense. So in this particular case, these two are the outer borders, and these are my inner. Now, I only measured 2 inches up here because the long pieces are going to go on after these are sewn in. So the raw size would be the 2.5, but it's going to finish at 2. Okay? So just like when I added these all together, I had 27 times 2 was the 54, but I still had these seam allowances that hadn't been sewn in yet that added the 1/2 inch back in, which brought us to 54.5. So I hope that that all makes sense. So what am I looking for? I'm going to be looking for at least 72 inches worth of material. Now, I want the excess material, okay? Because I personally don't care that I'm going to have the extra, because I'm going to turn it into sashing later. Sorry, not sashing, binding later. If I was being careful, I could go ahead, and I know from the layout that I did before that I had enough width and everything that I could piece together my interior sashing, okay, from the 72 inches. However, I don't care. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to look at this number. Okay, this is my short side. Now, why am I looking at that? Because instead of doing what we did last time, where we did the long pieces first, and then the short pieces, and then made up the difference, I'm actually going to do, this is not going to be to scale, okay? I am going to do my short pieces first. So I'm going to do 54. Like I said, this is not to scale, so I'm just going to rough it in here. So now I'm going to say, okay, that's here. So this entire strip is going to be 54.5 times 2. Okay, so that equals 109 inches. So then when I put on my 70-inch ones, they're going to show up around here. 6. Okay, and then I'll take my 2.5s from there, like that. Okay, and I'm going to get more of them. I'm going to get 5 of them out of this and still be within my 40 inches. I know that without doing the math because I did these at 6 inches and I had 4 of them, and now I only have 3. So that's at least an additional 6 inches I'll have for this, which gives me 6 of my strips. What does that mean? It means that were I piecing, then I would have to piece together 3 strips out of the stuff at the bottom. By doing my long sides here, I know that I have enough when I carry this down, that these 2.5s, because they're the same length, I'm going to get 2 here. So I'm going to get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 strips lengthwise. Now, when I cut these, I'm actually going to not cut them like this. I mean, I could cut them from both ends and leave the piece in the middle and then use this part down here as excess. Or I could cut all of the ones that are going to finish at 54.5 first and then cut my long side borders out of what's left. I know I've got plenty. So in my particular case, instead of looking for 6 feet of material, which is what I was looking for before, I'm looking for 109 inches. So how much is 109 inches? So 12 times 9 is 108. Am I right? 18. It's 118. So it's 18. 108. So that's a little bit short. So 3 yards will more than do it. I mean, 3 yards will just do it. And to be on the safe side, I want a little bit bigger. Why am I saying 3 yards will do it? When I'm doing the 54.5, yes, it is exactly the 109. But what I want to do is make sure I have a little bit of wiggle room. So I'm going to be looking at something along the lines of 9 feet and change. I don't need 3.5 yards. I need 3 1/4, 3 1/8 even. So when I'm going to my wall, I know that by wrapping around the ruler, like I taught you to do, I add a little tiny bit on each wrap because it has to go a little bit further to make the entire loop. So if I have enough to do 3 yards, that's 9 complete wraps of the ruler. So that's 2 layers of fabric, 2 more, 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 2 more. So I'm going to get an extra inch or 2 out of it. To be on the safe side, when I look, I want to make sure that I have at least the 9 feet's worth. And I'm probably going to go for like 10 just to be on the safe side. Again, I don't care if there's a little extra, I will subcut it down. Another reason I can do that is because I have so much fabric. If you didn't see that before, oops, wrong button. This is 2 out of 5 panels. Okay, now they're not all completely filled. You can see that there's some gaps like here, and there's a big open space here, but I have a lot to work with. And so for me, I can go ahead and waste a little bit if I want to. Not everybody can. So you have to work within your own stash, and whatever method is going to work better for you. But I just want to show you how I'm going to do my calculations. When we come back in 2 weeks, I'm going to go ahead and have picked the color, and we'll start tearing and start sewing them in. Okay? It is 8 o'clock. I don't want to hold you extra. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you had a good time. Please feel free to share information with us in terms of things you're stuck on, questions that you have, any comments that you want to make, good or bad. I'm open to anything. This whole YouTubing thing is new for me. So if you just want to tell me that I really do need to do my hair and makeup more, that's fine too. This is plain face. This is out of the shower. I got home from a client's. I took the shower. I ate my dinner. I came upstairs to do this. So sometimes you're going to get me with makeup, but a lot more often you're likely not going to. But again, if you liked what you saw today, please hit subscribe. The bell and liking would be wonderful. I would at some point in my future like to make this a full-time thing for myself so I can do a lot more sewing. Right now I'm doing my professional organizer thing, and I do that full-time, and so there's a lot less time for sewing than I would like. I personally would have liked to have kicked out 100 quilts this week to send down to Haiti because of the storms, or to other parts of the country that have had the bad storms. I just didn't get that chance, and that's not even counting Phoenix trips. So I would like to make this a bigger thing, but that'll only happen if we get people here and participating. I want this to be a warm and friendly place. Please come back again the first and third Wednesday of every month. See you next time. Now let's go sew.